Is there a conversation you wish you could have, a bridge you wish you could build with a loved one before it's too late? Hello, I'm John from Texas, United States, your friend and narrator of real stories. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story. Want to see your story told here? Then get in touch with us. This is a story about a father and a son, and a lifetime of unspoken words. For decades, James had measured his life in stock prices, in quarterly earnings, in the steady, satisfying climb of a successful career. At 79, however, he was facing a different kind of accounting. His wife of 51 years, the silent, steadfast partner in his success, was gone, and the large, quiet house echoed with the truth of what his ambition had cost him. The doctor's words from the week before were a drumbeat in his mind, a final, non-negotiable deadline. 6 months, James, maybe a little more with luck. The diagnosis, a swift and aggressive cancer, had not brought him fear of dying. It had brought him a terror far worse, the fear of dying unknown, particularly to his only son, Michael. Their relationship was a landscape of polite distances and unspoken resentments. James had been a ghost in his son's childhood, a provider of things, but a provider of very little time. He had built an empire, but he had failed to build a bridge to his own son. Now, with the clock ticking, a desperate, primal need consumed him. He had to make Michael see him, not as the cold, distant businessman, but as the man he truly was, with all his fears, his hopes, and the untold chapters of his love story. He picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. When Michael answered, his voice was as it always was, dutiful, reserved. "Hi, Dad. Everything okay?" "I need to ask you for something, son," James said, his voice raspy. "It's important. I want you to come over, every Saturday, just for an hour or two. I want to tell you my story, the real story." The silence on the other end of the line was thick with skepticism. "Your story?" Michael asked. "Dad, I know your story." "No," James insisted, a raw urgency in his tone. "You know the headlines. You don't know the book." Reluctantly, driven by a sense of duty, Michael agreed. The first Saturday was a study in awkwardness. They sat in James's formal living room, a room designed for entertaining clients, not for bearing souls. James, determined but clumsy, started at the beginning, with his own hard-scrabble childhood. He spoke of his ambition, of his burning desire to give his own family a life he never had. But the words came out wrong. They sounded like excuses, like a list of accomplishments, rather than a confession from the heart. Michael listened, his arms crossed, his face an unreadable mask of polite indifference. He was a stone wall, and James's words simply bounced off him. This is such a painful dynamic. We see a father trying to connect in the only way he knows how, and a son who has built a wall to protect himself. Have you ever been in a situation where you and a loved one were speaking different emotional languages? How do you bridge that gap? Share your thoughts in the comments. The second Saturday was even worse. James decided to talk about meeting Michael's mother, the beginning of their great love story. He spoke of her beauty, of their wedding, of the sacrifices he made. He was trying to show his love through the language he knew best, the language of provision. He was trying to say, "See how much I loved you all? I did all this for you." But all Michael seemed to hear was a lecture on the value of $1. "You worked hard, Dad, we know," Michael said at one point, his voice flat. The comment shut James down completely. He felt like a fool, a dying old man trying to rewrite history and failing miserably. After Michael left, a profound despair settled over James. He had only a handful of Saturdays left, and he was wasting them. He was failing at the most important negotiation of his life. His health was a constant reminder of his ticking clock. He felt the fatigue deep in his bones, a symptom of the disease that was quietly consuming him. He suffered from a fitful insomnia, waking in the deep of the night with a jolt of panic, the faces of his regrets lined up like accusers in the dark. That evening, he sat in his study, a glass of untouched whiskey on his desk. He felt a desperate need for guidance, for wisdom beyond his own. He looked at a photograph of his wife, Eleanor, on their wedding day. She had been the family's spiritual center, the one who read her Bible every night. Her faith had always been a quiet mystery to him, a source of strength he admired but never truly understood. Now, in his own desperation, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in decades. He bowed his head and prayed. It was a clumsy, broken prayer. "God," he whispered to the empty room, "if you are there, I'm making a mess of this. He won't listen. He can't see me. I don't know the right words. My whole life, I've known how to build things, how to win. But I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to tell my own son that I love him." He felt a tear slide down his cheek. "Please," he said, his voice cracking, "show me how, before it's too late." He sat there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on him. He looked again at the photo of Eleanor, at her bright, hopeful smile. He remembered how she used to tell him, "James, people don't remember the facts of your life. They remember the stories. They remember how you made them feel." How had he made his son feel? Respected? Cared for? Or had he made him feel like an item on a balance sheet, a responsibility to be provided for, but not a son to be loved? The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had been trying to win an argument, to present evidence of his love. He had been telling Michael the story of his life when he should have been telling him the story of his heart, and he knew, with a sudden, painful clarity, that he had one more chance to get it right. The following Saturday, when Michael arrived, the atmosphere was different. James didn't lead him to the formal living room. Instead, he gestured toward the small, worn armchairs in the den, a room that had always been his private sanctuary. He had a small photo album, not a corporate report, resting on the table between them. Michael eyed it with suspicion, but sat down. This shift in strategy, from reciting facts to sharing vulnerable memories, is so powerful. Have you ever found that sharing a specific, small story was the key to unlocking a difficult conversation with a loved one? Tell us about it. James didn't launch into a monologue about his career or his financial triumphs. He simply opened the album to a faded photograph of a little boy, no older than 7, proudly holding up a small, lopsided wooden birdhouse. "Do you remember this?" James asked, his voice quiet. Michael looked at the photo, his expression unreadable. "Vaguely," he said. "I think I made it at summer camp." "You did," James said. "You were so proud of it. You worked on it for weeks. And when you brought it home, you asked me to help you hang it on the big oak tree in the backyard." James paused, the memory sharp and painful. "And do you remember what I said?" Michael shook his head, a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, in his eyes. James took a deep breath, the confession feeling like a stone in his throat. "I told you I was too busy," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I told you I had an important call to make. I told you we'd do it next weekend. But next weekend never came, did it? The birdhouse sat in the garage, collecting dust, until your mother quietly hung it up herself a month later." He finally looked up and met his son's gaze. The mask of indifference on Michael's face was beginning to crack. "I want to tell you about that day, Michael. Not the excuse I gave you, but the truth." James leaned forward, his hands clasped together, a gesture of supplication. The truth is, the phone call wasn't that important. The truth is, I was terrified. I looked at that little birdhouse you made, and I looked at you. With your eyes so full of hope, asking me to do this simple thing, this thing that a father should do, and I felt like a complete and utter fraud. I didn't know how to be a father, Michael. My own father was a hard man. He taught me how to work, how to provide, how to survive. But he never taught me how to play. He never taught me how to just be with his son. And when you asked me to hang that birdhouse, all I could think was, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to disappoint him. So I did what I always did when I was scared. I retreated to the one place where I felt competent, where I knew the rules. I retreated to my work. This was the story of his heart. It was a story of fear, of inadequacy, of a deep-seated insecurity that he had hidden beneath a lifetime of success. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to his son. Michael was silent for a long time. The stone wall was crumbling, and he was seeing the man behind it for the first time. He was seeing not a powerful CEO, but a scared little boy who had never learned how to be a dad. All those years, James continued, his voice heavy with the weight of his confession. All those missed games, those late nights at the office, I told myself it was for you, for the family, and a part of that was true. But the deeper truth, the one I've been running from my whole life, is that it was also for me. Work was my hiding place. It was easier to be a successful businessman than it was to be a husband and a father, because I didn't know how to do anything else. I loved you so much, son, but I loved you from a distance because I was terrified of getting it wrong up close. James's confession that his ambition was partly fueled by fear is incredibly honest. It's a reminder that our actions often have complex motivations that even those closest to us don't see. Does this story make you think differently about a parent or loved one in your own life? Share your reflections. He then turned the page in the album to a picture of Michael's high school graduation. Michael was standing in his cap and gown, but there was a space beside him where his father should have been. I missed this day, James said softly. I was in Tokyo, closing a deal. I told you it was unavoidable. That was a lie. I could have sent someone else, but I was afraid to come. I was afraid of seeing the man you had become and knowing how little I had to do with it. I was afraid of seeing the disappointment in your eyes. So I ran. I ran to the other side of the world to close a deal that I don't even remember now. And I missed one of the proudest days of your life. And it is the single greatest regret of my entire existence. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and undeniable. Michael finally spoke, his voice thick with an emotion James had never heard from him before. I didn't know, he said. I thought you didn't care. That's the tragedy of it all, James whispered, tears now openly streaming down his face. I cared so much that the fear of failing you paralyzed me, and in my paralysis, I failed you completely. That Saturday was the breakthrough. It was the first time they had spoken the same language, the language of the heart. When Michael left that day, he didn't just shake his father's hand. He pulled him into a hug, a clumsy, unpracticed embrace that was more powerful than any corporate merger James had ever negotiated. The Saturdays that followed were different. They were no longer a duty, but a discovery. Michael started asking questions, not about business, but about his father's life, about his fears, his dreams, his own love story. James, in turn, learned to speak from his heart. He told Michael about his first date with Eleanor, how his hands had sweated and his voice had cracked. He told him about the terror he felt the day Michael was born. the overwhelming sense of responsibility. He was not just recounting facts, he was sharing his soul. As James's health declined, as the insomnia and the fatigue from his illness grew worse, Michael's presence became his anchor. The roles began to reverse. It was Michael who would sit by his father's bed when he couldn't sleep, not offering business advice, but simply being there, a quiet, steady presence in the dark. This role reversal between a parent and child is a profound part of life for many. For those who have experienced it, what is the most challenging and also the most rewarding part of caring for an aging parent? One night, as James struggled with a bout of pain, he looked at his son and saw not a stranger, but a friend. "You're a good man, Michael," James said, his voice weak. "A better man than I ever was." Michael squeezed his father's hand. "You taught me how to be, Dad. You just taught me in a different way." In those final weeks, James finally understood the true nature of success. It wasn't in the stock prices or the quarterly reports. It was in this room, in the quiet understanding that had finally bloomed between a father and his son. It was in the forgiveness that had been given without being asked. It was in the love that had finally found its voice. James's final negotiation was not about money or power. It was about grace. He had spent his life building an empire of things, and in the end, he discovered that the only thing that mattered was the one thing he had neglected: the human heart, his own and his son's. He found his faith again in those last days, not in a church pew, but in the sacred space of his son's forgiveness. He saw the face of God not in a stained glass window, but in the compassionate eyes of the man sitting beside him. He realized that Jesus' most powerful story was not about walking on water, but about the parable of the prodigal son, a story of a father's unconditional love and a son's return. In his own way, James was both. He was the son who had been lost in the far country of his own ambition, and he was the father, finally opening his arms to the son he had kept at a distance for far too long. The final weeks of James's life were not marked by a miraculous recovery of his health, but by a quiet, sacred healing of the soul. The large house, once a monument to his professional success and personal distance, became a sanctuary of reconciliation. The insomnia that had tortured James for months began to lose its power, not because the physical pain was gone, but because the mental anguish had subsided. He was no longer wrestling with the ghosts of his regret alone in the dark. Michael was there. True to his word, Michael came every day. He took over the difficult calls with the doctors, becoming a fierce but compassionate advocate for his father's comfort. He learned to manage the medications, to adjust the pillows, to simply sit in comfortable silence when his father was too weak to speak. He was repaying a lifetime of absence with a final season of unwavering presence. In these quiet hours, they continued to fill in the missing pages of their family's epic book. Michael would ask about his grandparents, about his father's dreams as a young man, about the early days of his parents' love story. And James, free from the need to project an image of strength, would answer with a raw and beautiful honesty. One afternoon, as Michael was reading aloud to him, James held up a weak hand, asking him to pause. "Michael," he said, his voice a soft rasp, "all my life, I thought my legacy would be the company I built, the buildings with my name on them. I was a fool." He looked at his son, his eyes clear and full of a love that needed no translation. You are my legacy. The good man you are, the good husband and father you've become. You are everything I always wanted to be and was too afraid to try. I am so proud of you." Michael couldn't speak, his throat tight with emotion. He simply squeezed his father's hand. The years of resentment and misunderstanding dissolving in that one powerful moment of acknowledgement. The idea that James's greatest gift was this final, honest connection is so moving. Do you believe it's ever too late to heal a relationship with a loved one? Share your stories of late-in-life reconciliation in the comments. In those last days, James spoke often of his faith, a topic he had long avoided. He talked about his wife, Eleanor, and her quiet certainty in God's love. "I think," James said one evening, his gaze distant, "that she's been waiting for me. I think she knew I had one last piece of business to attend to here before I could go home." That business was Michael. James passed away peacefully on a Tuesday morning, with Michael holding his hand. The end was quiet, dignified, and filled with a sense of peace that would have been unimaginable just a few months prior. It was a sad, profound loss, but it was not a tragedy. It was the closing of a book that had found its perfect ending. At the funeral, Michael stood before the small gathering of family and friends. He didn't talk about his father's business acumen or his legendary career. He spoke of the last few months of his father's life. He told the story of the awkward Saturday meetings that had transformed into a sacred gift. "For 50 years, Michael said, his voice steady, "I knew my father's accomplishments. In the last 3 months, I finally got to know his heart, and it was the greatest gift he ever gave me." After everyone had gone, Michael returned to his father's house one last time. He walked into the den and picked up the small photo album. As he turned the pages, he wasn't just seeing photos. He was hearing his father's voice, finally understanding the love and the fear that had driven him. His father had succeeded. He had told his story. The epic book of James's life was finally complete, and its final chapter, the one written in the ink of humility and love, was by far its best. The story of James and Michael is a heartbreaking and beautiful reminder that it is never ever too late. It is a testament to the power of forgiveness and the desperate need we all have to be truly seen by the ones we love. It teaches us that our true legacy is not what we build with our hands, but the love we cultivate in the hearts of our family. Life is short, and the list of unspoken words can grow so long. If this story has moved you, if it has made you think of a conversation you need to have, please honor that feeling by leaving a like and subscribing to Stories Beyond 50. And now we open this space to you. Who in your life do you need to share your heart with? Is there a story of regret or misunderstanding in your family that needs the healing light of forgiveness? What is the legacy you truly want to leave behind? Your wisdom and your experiences are invaluable. Please share your thoughts with our community in the comments below. And if you are not ready to share, but you believe in the power of forgiveness to heal a family, just write the single word forgiveness in the comments. Let us create a space of grace and understanding together. Every word you write is a gift. Thank you for your courage and your open heart. God bless you, and we will see you in the next story.